On your left is a 55-inch Samsung S90C QD-OLED. On your right is a 65-inch Samsung QN95C Neo QLED Mini LED TV. On rectangular test patterns, the Samsung QN95C Mini LED TV could go brighter than the S90C QD-OLED, hitting 2000 nits on a 10% window and 700 nits full fill. However, Mini LED's higher measured brightness didn't always transfer across to real-world HDR content. Sure, high APL scenes, such as this one from Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, will look brighter on the QN95C. As a result of its higher brightness, the Samsung QN95C Neo QLED could also resolve more bright highlight detail in HDR movies containing 4000 nit elements, such as this sequence from the 4K Blu-ray of Pan. Nevertheless, in most HDR scenes with an average APL, small areas of specular highlights would actually look brighter on the S90C QD-OLED, since every pixel could be driven to maximum brightness if required independently of each other, whereas the Samsung QN95C was not only not blessed with pixel-level light control, but also had to put a cap on the brightness of small areas to minimize blooming artifacts, none more obvious than in this starfield pattern from the Spears & Munsell UHD HDR benchmark disc, which, to be fair, has always looked more accurate on any OLED than on any LED LCD display. In this challenging campfire scene from The Revenant, you can see the Samsung QN95C Neo QLED Mini LED TV dimming down the bright white subtitles to keep halation at bay. Using the Sony BVM HX310 mastering monitor as reference, both Samsung televisions were crushing some shadow detail, though it's less severe on the QN95C. In HDR movies graded conservatively to an SDR equivalent of 200 nits, the Samsung QN95C no longer overbrightened the entire image, thanks to a new HDR tone mapping setting in the picture menu which disables dynamic tone mapping by default in filmmaker mode. However, given that the black floor was higher as a result of maximum backlight in HDR mode, the picture on the Samsung QN95C just appeared slightly lacking in depth compared to that produced by the S90C QD-OLED. In very dark scenes, QD-OLED's per-pixel illumination control also helped the S90C etch out individual detail in a clearer manner, as long as it's not crushed by Samsung's near-black gamma implementation, while the HDR presentation on the QN95C in such scenes was punctuated by areas of blooming or crushed shadow detail. By default, the Samsung S90C would gradually dim down in prolonged dark HDR sequences, as an unfortunate consequence of a protective mechanism to reduce the risk of permanent burn-in. You can disable the auto-dimming by going into the service menu. But if you don't want to risk voiding your warranty or even bricking your QD-OLED if you don't know what you are doing, then the QN95C Neo QLED Mini LED TV, which didn't exhibit this sort of auto-dimming behavior in the first place, may be more appealing. QD-OLED's screen uniformity and viewing angles are some of the best on the market at the time I filmed this video in May 2023, and naturally couldn't be matched by our 65-inch Samsung QN95C review sample, which suffered from minor dirty screen effect or DSE and darkening around the edges, despite being one of the cleaner Samsung Neo QLED TVs we've tested so far. Interestingly, if we sent single-pixel test patterns from the new Spears & Munsell UHD HDR benchmark disc to both televisions, screen uniformity would get noticeably worse on the QN95C with visible vertical bands on top of tinting. Fortunately, we didn't see this malfunction of Mura compensation in real-world content, even in 4K 120Hz games with HDR and VRR enabled. The anti-glare coating on the Samsung QN95C would manifest some rainbow reflections when hit by light, while the S90C QD-OLED would turn grey owing to the absence of a polarizer. The 65-inch Samsung QN95C is equipped with a VA-type LCD panel with a native contrast ratio of 2700:1, possibly affected by the inclusion of a viewing angle compensation filter to reduce gamma and color shifts off-axis. Using our own custom-authored test pattern containing a small white box crawling horizontally and then vertically against a black background, we counted 1,344 independently dimmable zones in a 48x28 grid, representing almost twice the number of local dimming zones on last year's QN95B. SDR color accuracy was very good after calibration, with an average delta error of around 1.5 on this challenging color checker SG chart where 140 patches were measured, and only a couple of colors exceeding the humanly perceptible threshold of delta error 3, translating to largely natural and cinematic colors in real-world viewing. Despite the presence of quantum dot enhancement film, DCI-P3 color gamut coverage only reached 95% in UV terms, while Red 2020 coverage was 75%, which may partly explain why the flames in Mad Max Fury Road did not look as impactful as what's seen on the Samsung S90C QD-OLED. The Samsung QN95C exhibited similar motion quirks to what we've reported on previous TVs from the South Korean brand. On our review sample, engaging picture clarity was essential to guarantee 5.5 pull-down and prevent telesonic judder in 24 frames per second films. Just make sure to zero out the judder reduction setting under the custom sub-menu if you don't want to see soap opera effect or SOE and interpolation artifacts. The 24p motion processing appeared to work on a scene-by-scene basis, even with picture clarity disabled, applying interpolation for one frame before switching it off for the remainder of the scene, causing a visible stutter immediately after certain scene cuts, for instance in our own custom-authored interpolation detection test pattern. Fortunately, we only saw this 24p motion hiccup very rarely when watching real-world content, and so weren't overly bothered. Motion interpolation with 50Hz broadcast material we get in PAL countries such as the United Kingdom seemed to have been improved, incurring less microstutter artifacts than before. Black frame insertion or BFI, which is activated by the LED clear motion setting, was not a viable solution for us, owing to excessive light loss and flicker, as well as forced interpolation with 50Hz content, which is Samsung's workaround to mask the inevitable frame rate conversion judder caused by 60Hz BFI. Like on all Samsung TVs, overscan cannot be disabled in standard definition resolution on the QN95C. For example, in this SMPTE RP133 test card in 576i, leading to a more zoomed-in and slightly softer standard def presentation. Jaggy's suppression in video-based interlaced material was excellent. In terms of film mode deinterlacing, although the QN95C Neo QLED correctly detected and processed 3-2 cadence, the TV failed to do so for 2-2 cadence, which is far more common in the UK and other PAL regions, even with film mode engaged. Native 10-bit gradation was very good, with little to no posterization seen in the skies of The Martian, so the lack of a smooth gradation debending setting wasn't an issue at all when watching 4K Blu-ray. With game mode engaged, input lag measured 10 milliseconds at 60 frames per second, and surprisingly did not go down significantly at 120 frames per second according to our 𝗪𝗧 4K lag tester. To achieve lower input lag, some picture processing normally has to be sacrificed, and as a consequence, local dimming in game mode was not as effective as that in other picture presets, contributing to slightly grayer blacks and a more washed out appearance in dark scenes. Nevertheless, some gamers will be drawn to the QN95C's zero risk of burn-in from static HUDs on screen. Among TV brands, Samsung is unique in allowing for some form of motion interpolation in game mode, which is activated through the Game Motion Plus setting. This would only increase input lag to around 30 milliseconds on the QN95C, which some gamers are happy to tolerate in exchange for smoother gameplay in 30 FPS games. Although be mindful that engaging Game Motion Plus would also introduce some interpolation artifacts. 4 HDMI 2.1 ports are provided, each supporting the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second, as well as 24 gigabits per second of DSC or display stream compression. The Samsung QN95C even supports 4K 144Hz refresh rate, although realistically this will only benefit PC gamers with high-end graphics cards. The game HDR setting is intended to activate HDRG, But unfortunately, because the hard clipping was set at 4000 nits on the latest firmware of 11.05 at the time we filmed this video in May 2023, users would be pushed towards overly high max TML and max FFTML values of 4000 nits, which, to be fair, still retain plenty of bright highlight detail, albeit with a slightly more washed out APL. If you want to see more image depth from an HDRG compliant game, then we highly recommend setting max TML and max FFTML to 2000 nits, which is more in keeping with the QN95C's panel peak brightness. VRR, including unofficial NVIDIA G-Sync compatibility, provided buttery smooth gameplay without noticeable tearing or frame drops, and possibly helped by LED LCD's higher black floor, we saw little to no VRR flicker in VRR games that would otherwise reveal such artifacts on OLEDs. 444 was fully reproduced in PC mode, and native 10-bit gradation was good, judging from this gray ramp pattern in the Display HDR app. You won't be able to play games in Dolby Vision from the Xbox Series X on the QN95C, since no Samsung TV supports Dolby Vision currently. Sound quality on our Samsung 65QN95C review unit was underwhelming, mainly because of surprisingly anemic bass, causing every type of content to sound lacking in authority, even though dialogue clarity was decent with tonally pleasant highs. The Tizen-based Smart TV interface on the QN95C feels snappier than on last year's Samsung TVs, but remains clunkier and more confusing than the UI adopted by rival brands, especially if you just want to switch input sources or adjust the settings using the pared-down smart remote. To sum up, the Samsung QN95C Neo QLED is one of the best mini LED TVs you can buy on the market in 2023, thanks to almost double the number of local dimming zones, as well as a peak brightness of 2000 nits accompanied by accurate PQ UTF tracking that's no longer distorted by undefeatable dynamic tone mapping, and so it receives our highly recommended award. We still think the less expensive Samsung S95C and S90C QD-OLEDs deliver better overall picture quality due to pixel-level light control, which allows for true blacks, superior screen uniformity and viewing angles, as well as faster pixel response time. Then again, some of you may prefer the QN95C's higher light output and zero risk of burn-in and hence absence of anti-screen burn auto-dimming shenanigans. And it's good to see Samsung continuing to offer both QD-OLED and Neo QLED mini LED models to give consumers a wider choice of TVs to buy from the company. Talking of which, if you buy a 2023 OLED or Samsung Neo QLED from UK electrical retailer 𝗪𝗡𝗚, who have kindly sponsored this video, you can get it calibrated in store for only £99 for a limited time only. I have personally trained their calibrator David Corner to my own high standards. He will run in the television, calibrate it, and deliver it to you after having the calibration approved by me. We have been doing this for almost 2 years now, and customer feedback has been excellent. So please give 𝗪𝗡𝗚 a call if you wish to buy a calibrated TV, or even any new TV at a competitive price with excellent customer service. Thanks again for your support. Okay, if you still can't make up your mind whether to go for a Samsung Neo QLED or a Samsung QD-OLED, then you should definitely check out my side-by-side HDR comparison video